Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, we will check out the next 5 marks question, cross demand. Okay, SAQ 15, explain the concept of cross demand. Okay, let me briefly explain to you what is the cross demand. So, what is the meaning of cross demand? So, it is the functional relationship between demand for good X and price of its related good Y. See, so many commodities, they have their own related commodities. Okay, so the related commodities, it can be either the substitute commodity or it can be a complementary commodity. Okay, so whatever the price of this related commodities, whenever the price of the related commodity changes, so the demand for the original commodity will also change. See, if the price of coffee increases, the demand for tea is affected. If the price of shoes are increasing, the demand for socks is affected. If the price of petrol is changing, the demand for cars is affected, isn't it? So there are so many commodities which are having the related commodities. So whenever the prices of those related commodities change, the demand for the original commodity will also change. So that relationship is known as the cross demand. So if you are writing it in the form of an equation, demand for commodity X, that is dx, is equal to f, that is a function, py, that is a price of commodity Y, or in other words, demand for commodity X is a function of price of commodity Y. So other factors remaining constant. So whenever we say other factors constant, this is a constant assumption, ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus, all the laws of economics, they say that it is a ceteris paribus, assumptions are there. So ceteris paribus is other factors remaining constant. We know there are so many factors that is affecting the demand for a commodity apart from price, isn't it? We finished the determinants of demand. So here what we are assuming, the demand for the commodity X is only the function of price of its related commodity Y, assuming all the other factors like the price of commodity X, the income of the consumer, the taste and preferences of the consumers. So like that, so many other factors are there, isn't it? So all those other factors are remaining constant. The demand for commodity X is only affected by the change in price of its related commodity Y. Okay, so Y is assumed to be the related commodity for commodity X, and this related commodity can be of two types. One, it can be substitute. So substitute, what is the meaning of substitute? Either you can use commodity X or commodity Y in order to satisfy your want. So if commodities are satisfying your want separately, either this commodity or the other commodity, you can replace commodity X with commodity Y. Okay, so those type of commodities are called as the substitute commodities. So I have given some of the examples here: tea and coffee, burgers and pizzas, train and bus, etc. Okay, so these are all the some of the substitute commodity. So if you are taking tea as commodity X, the related commodity for tea is coffee, that is commodity Y. If you are taking burgers as commodity X, the related commodity for burger X is commodity Y, that is pizzas. If the commodity or service train is taken as X, then the related service for train is the bus, that is service Y. So these are all the commodities which are substitutes. Okay, so the consumer can either consume tea or coffee. Nobody is going to consume both together, isn't it? Either tea or coffee. The consumer can consume either burgers or pizza. The consumer can travel either by train or by bus. So whatever these type of commodities which are replacing one commodity with the other commodity, they are called as the substitute. And what is the relationship here? For the substitute goods, the relationship is direct. So why I'm saying it is direct? Because if the price of tea increases, the consumer will demand more of coffee, isn't it? So what is happening here? The price of tea is also increasing, the demand for coffee is increasing. So here we are taking into account the price of tea and the demand for coffee. We are not taking price of tea and demand for tea, that is law of demand. Okay, if you are taking the demand for commodity X is a function of price of commodity X, that is law of demand. But here we are taking the cross demand, that is demand for commodity X is a function of price of commodity Y. Okay, so the demand for tea is a function of price of coffee. Demand for burgers is a function of price of pizzas, etc. So if the price of Y, that is if the price of coffee increases, the demand for tea will increase. If the price of pizzas are increasing, the demand for the demand for burgers will also increase. So here it is X. So when the price of Y increases, the demand for X will also increase. When the price of Y decreases, the demand for X will also decrease. So that's why the cross demand curve is positive or upward sloping for substitute. So please remember, for substitutes the cross demand is direct, that is the relationship is positive or direct relationship. Okay, now the next type of related commodities is the complementary goods. So the complementary goods, you need two goods jointly together to satisfy one want. So like for example, car and petrol. So without petrol, car is useless, isn't it? Without sugar, coffee is useless. So those kind of commodities, you need both car and petrol together to satisfy your want of traveling somewhere. You need both the sugar and coffee to satisfy your want of consuming coffee. Okay, so two goods are required jointly or together in order to satisfy one particular want, that is what is called as the complementary goods. So car and petrol, sugar and coffee, bread and jam, shoes and socks, isn't it? So they are all some of the complementary commodities. Now what is the relationship here? So here the relationship is like inverse or indirect, because if the price of petrol increases, the demand for car will decrease. If the price of sugar increases, the demand for coffee is decreasing. If the price of socks is increasing, the demand for shoes are decreasing. Okay, so that is the in complementary goods, it is inverse. So that is, if price of Y, again I made a mistake here. So if price of Y increases, the demand for X will decrease. If the price of Y decreases, the demand for X will increase. Okay, so they will have a opposite relationship. So that's why the cross demand curve is negative or downward sloping for complementary goods. Now this is the brief explanation of cross demand. The same thing in the answer, you have to explain it with the help of a table and diagram. Okay, so make sure there is demand for X, and here also it is make sure that it is demand for X. Okay, we are talking about the price of Y and the demand for X. Here also we are talking about the price of Y and the demand for X. Okay, now just before going to the actual answer, I would like to inform you that please make a note of it. There are three types of demand. Okay, so the three types of demand, the first one is the price demand. So what is the meaning of price demand? The functional relationship between the price of commodity X and the demand for commodity X, that is D of X is a function of P of X, other factors remaining constant, that is price of substitutes and complement, the prices of, that is the price of related commodities, the income of the consumer, the taste and preferences of the consumer, all those things they are remaining constant. The demand for commodity X is only the function of price of commodity X. So price demand is explained through the law of demand. So if you remember the law of demand, it is having an inverse relationship, that is if the price of commodity X increases, the demand for commodity X will decrease and vice versa. That is first type of demand. And the second type of demand is the income demand. So income demand is functional relationship between income of the consumer and demand for commodity X or any commodity. So D of X is a function of Y. Y represents the income of the consumer, and all the other factors, that is the price of commodity X, the prices of related commodities, taste and preferences, etc. All those determinants are remaining constant. Demand for commodity X is only a function of the income of the consumer, that is income demand. So here we have seen there are two types of commodities, isn't it? Superior goods, it is having the positive or direct relationship, and as far as the inferior goods are concerned, if the income of the consumer increases, the demand will decrease, that is the negative or indirect relationship. And the third type of demand is what I have just explained to you, the cross demand, that is the functional relationship between demand for good X and price of its related commodity Y. That is demand for commodity X is equal to F of P of Y, and all the other factors are remaining constant. So here the price of commodity X, the income of the consumer, they are all remaining constant. And for substitutes, it is positive or direct relationship, and for complementary goods, it is having the negative or indirect relationship. Okay, now we will move to the actual answer. Okay, so SAQ 50, explain the concept of cross demand. So first you have to write the meaning. The functional relationship between the demand for a good, say X, and the price of its related good, say Y, other factors of demand remaining constant, is known as cross demand. So this is the meaning of cross demand. So what are the types of related goods? The related good can either be a substitute good or a complementary good to good X. Okay, so cross demand, if you are writing in the form of an equation, cross demand can be written as d of x is equal to f of p of y, other factors constant, where d of x represents demand for good x, f represents function, and you can write functional relationship also, and py represents the price of its related good y. Okay, the cross demand is direct for substitutes, that is, when the price of y increases, the demand for good x also increases. It is indirect for complementary goods, that is, when the price of y increases, the demand for good x decreases. Okay, so cross demand can be explained with the help of tables and diagrams. First, let us take the substitute goods. Now, what is the meaning of substitute goods? Substitutes are those goods which satisfy the same bond separately. Okay, they are not together, they satisfy the same bond separately. Example, you can give any example. Here I have given coffee and tea, bus and train, etc. Okay, now let us move on, explain it with the help of a table. So the table is the schedule for substitutes. So what you are observing in the table, so there are two columns. So first column is representing the price and demand of coffee in cups, and the second one is representing the price and demand for tea in cups. Okay, now this is assume this is a market demand, this is not an individual demand, this is a market demand. So we are talking about the price of coffee and the demand for tea. Okay, so you are taking the price of one commodity and you are taking the demand of another commodity. Okay, now what you are observing here, when the price of coffee has decreased from 10 rupees to 9 rupees. Okay, it is decreasing, assuming the price of tea is remaining constant. So what is happening? The price of tea is remaining constant. Price of tea constant. Okay, so when the price of coffee is decreasing from 10 rupees, so coffee is the substitute for tea. So when the price of coffee has decreased from 10 rupees to 9 rupees, so price of coffee decreases. So now what is happening when the price of coffee has decreased? The demand for tea has decreased. So demand for tea has decreased from 500 cups to 400 cups. So the demand for tea decreased. Okay, so this is what you are representing. Of course, demand for coffee is also increasing, but here we need not have to mention about that. What we have to mention here, when the price of coffee has decreased from 10 rupees to 9 rupees, the demand for tea has decreased. So you are mentioning the price of coffee and the demand for tea. So this is the schedule for substitute. So what you're finding here, prices of the price of coffee is decreasing and the demand for tea is also decreasing. So they both are having the direct relationship. Okay, so this is the schedule for substitute goods. So the same thing you are explaining in the form of a in sentences. The above table shows that as the price of coffee decreases from rupees 10 per cup to rupees 9 per cup and the price of tea is remaining same at rupees 10 per cup, the demand for coffee increases from 500 cups to 600 cups while the demand for tea declines from 500 cups to 400 cups. So this is because the consumer preferred to substitute cheaper commodity coffee for costlier commodity tea. Thus cross demand is direct for substitute goods. Okay, so basically you have to understand the price of coffee has decreased and the demand for tea has also decreased. Okay, so that is the substitute goods. So the same thing you have to explain it in the form of a diagram also. So the diagram is the demand curve for substitute goods. So what you have to represent, you have to take only two things. X-axis we are representing the quantity demanded of tea, and Y-axis we are representing the price of coffee. Okay, so once again I will explain to you. If you remember the equation, D of X is equal to F of P of Y, isn't it? That is the equation. So here assume for the time being we are talking about the T, take it as X, and this is D of X. T is the demand for commodity X, so that is T, and coffee we are taking up the price of coffee. This is price of Y, so that is price of coffee. Okay, so now this is what you have to represent in the form of a diagram. So what you are taking in the x-axis, we are representing the quantity demanded of tea, and y-axis we are representing the price of coffee. So I have marked with the arrow mark. When the price of coffee happens to be P, original price was OP, and the original quantity of tea demanded was OQ. When the price of coffee has decreased, that's why I have put the downward direction P1. When the price of coffee has decreased from P to P1, the demand for T has also decreased from Q to Q1. You can make the other way around also. If the original price of coffee is P1, so actually in the table we have mentioned the price of coffee has decreased, the demand for tea also decreased. So the same thing we are mentioning in the diagram. The price of coffee has decreased from P to P1. The demand for tea also decreased from Q to Q1. So you join this curve, you will get the upward sloping demand curve. So CD is the positive or upward sloping cross demand curve. So remember, very important, cross demand for substitute good is direct. So the same thing, explanation. The above diagram indicates as the price of coffee decreased from P to P1, the quantity demanded of tea also decreased from Q to Q1. So CD is the positive or upward sloping cross demand curve indicating direct relationship for substitutes. Okay, now we will move on to the next one, next type of related commodity, that is the complementary goods. So meaning of complementary goods: complementary goods are those goods which satisfy the same want jointly. Okay, example, sugar and coffee, petrol and car, etc. So as usual we have to explain with the help of an hypothetical table. So you can see the tables, that is a schedule for complementary goods. So you are observing the car on the one, the first column representing the price and demand for car, and the second column is representing the price and demand for fuel. Okay, then here what you have to take into account, the price of fuel has decreased. Okay, so the price of fuel has decreases. Now what is happening? The demand for car is increasing. So when the price of fuel decreased, the demand for cars increased. So when the price of fuel has decreased from 110 rupees per liter, then to 80 rupees per, when the price of fuel is 110 rupees per liter, the demand for cars for 1000 rupees. Okay, of course demand for fuel is 500. When the price of fuel has decreased to 80 rupees per liter, the demand for cars have increased to 2000 units. So again this is also market demand, assuming the price of car is remaining at 10 lakhs. See, we don't want between the price of car and the demand for car. We are not talking about price of fuel and the demand for fuel. That is law of demand. Here we are talking about the price of fuel and the demand for cars. Okay, so the demand for car, this is commodity X and this is the price of Y. Okay, so when the price of Y has decreased, the demand for car has increased. That is cross demand. So that is what it is. The above table shows that as the price of fuel declined from rupees 110 per liter to rupees 80 per liter, the demand for cars increased from 1000 to 2000 units. Thus cross demand is indirect for complementary goods. So here also you have to explain with the help of a diagram. So the diagram, the demand curve for complementary goods. So what is happening here? X-axis, the quantity demanded of car, because car happens to be the commodity X, demand for commodity X, and Y-axis the price of Y, that is the price of fuel. Okay, again I have marked with the arrow marks. When the price of fuel has decreased from P to P1, when the price was OP, the demand for cars was OQ1. When the price of fuel decreased from P to P1, that is OP1, the demand for cars have increased to Q1. Okay, so that's what, when the price has decreased from OP to OP1, the demand for cars also increased from OQ to OQ1. Okay, you can, the direction of the arrow marks you can understand. P to P1 it is declining, Q to Q1 it is increasing. So what you are having, you are having CD, that is the negative or the downward sloping demand curve. So demand curve will be sloping downwards for complementary goods. Okay, the same thing in the verse explanation. The above diagram shows that as the price of fuel decreased from P to P1, the quantity demanded of cars have increased from Q to Q1. So finally, CD is the negative or downward sloping cross demand curve, indicating the inverse relationship for complementary goods. So remember, for substitutes it is positive or direct relation and it is upward sloping, and for complementary goods it is negative or downward sloping. Okay, it's a downward sloping demand curve, it's an indirect relationship. The same thing for income demand, for superior goods it is a positive or a upward sloping direct relation, and for inferior goods it is a negative or downward sloping, that is the indirect relationship. Okay, so and law of demand, price demand inverse relationship unless it is an exception, like given goods, Veblen goods and all. Okay, so these are all the 3 types of demand, and each and every one of these is important for 5 marks, and you might get this income demand, cross demand, even price demand even for 2 marks also. So you just have to mention the meaning, what is the equation, and then for what type of commodities it is direct and what type of commodities is indirect, you have to mention that. That is up to 2 marks. The same thing is asked for 5 marks. You have to explain that the same thing with the help of the table and the diagram. That is for 5 marks. Okay, so I hope it is clear to all of you. If you find this video useful, please like, share and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, so until my next class, take care. Bye bye.